Perfect.
Yeah, looks good.
Thank you, Elaine. So I'm going to be talking everyone through the ethics application process today. It shaped my research drastically. Originally, my title was How the Ethics Process Shaped My Research Question, but as I was going through, it sort of got bigger and bigger. So I've changed my title to encompass all of my research. And I'm going to talk about the benefits and the drawbacks of the process. My name's Karen. I'm a second year PhD student in the School of Education. A little bit of background about my research. So my research grew from my master's dissertation, which I did at Brunel University in London, and I did a cross-cultural psychology paper. So I was looking at investigating differences in stress expression between two cultural groups, and I was doing a quantitative project. So I got data in the UK, and then I went to do field work in Cambodia. And I was looking at types of somatic stress and also the variables of mental health stigma, religion or spirituality, and self-control, and how these things may have impacted stress expression or been coping mechanisms for people. So this was my background. I thought I had a very good foundation because I'd done my master's research. I knew my topic. I was into my literature. And I started going through the ethics application process after my first APR. So it was in April of last year. So I thought I'd started early, I've got background in this topic, and I've got existing research questions. What could go wrong? So the ethics application process, what is it? It's a very formal process that you need to go through regardless of what school you're in, if you're collecting data with human participants, material, or data in your college. So the time frame after submission is 6 weeks plus corrections. So from the point that you submit all of your documents, which you need to submit all together, 6 weeks, and then they do advise that most people get some type of corrections, hopefully minor, and things that you can tweak and pop back in. But an additional few weeks for corrections as well. And like I was saying, because I'm now doing a mixed methods project, I had to do two. So I had to do 2 ethics applications. So what is involved within this? So you have the application itself. So in the School of Education, the application is 13 pages without text. So before you put anything in, it's a lengthy document. And then you have all of the additional considerations and documentation that you need to put in as well. So participant information sheet, consent form, debrief, privacy notice. Also, depending on whether you're doing a quants or qual study, you've got different things to submit. So for my quants, I had to put a list of my scale questions, demographic questions, and for my qual, a list of my interview themes. So all of this gets submitted together at the same time in the online ethics portal. Additional considerations just to think about. All of my data is classified as high risk. So I'm talking about religion, culture, personal experiences of stress and how that feels in the body. It's all very sensitive data and it's classed as high risk. Because of this, there's additional ethical considerations, which I knew before starting the process, but I don't think I realized quite what I would have to accommodate for when I was doing the paperwork to submit. So also if you're doing loan working, if you're doing overseas data collection, working with vulnerable groups, these are things to consider. Also for me, I ended up implementing visual research methods. So for this, I needed extra documentation. So I needed a consent form for my photo subjects. I needed instructions about how to take the picture, what you can take pictures of, what you can't, and copyright laws. So it's just extra things to consider. So I worked out my total, and this was quite fun while I was making these slides. So in total, I submitted 22 documents over the course of doing 2 applications. In the end, my quantitative project was 20 pages and my qual 23 pages, and it took me 10 months. I didn't expect it to take this long. Now, the reason I've gone into detail about what the ethics process is and all of the documentation is to start showing the level of depth that is needed if this is a process that you have to go through. So when I started, I went back to my original research questions and I realized very quickly that I had an insufficient level of depth in them. They weren't able to justify why I'm making the choices I'm making and why I'm making the decisions about my project. In multiple supervisions with my primary supervisor, Dr. Deli Elliott, she referred to the ethics application as a blueprint, as something that you can return to before you start collecting data, during the process and after, like bullet point by bullet point, step by step by step. Where are you at and what are you doing? So working on your ethics applications is an investment into this blueprint, and it's something I have been using already. So I had to return to my questions and reshape them. So how did the ethics application shape my research? And it did shape it entirely. So I'm going to go through a few examples. So the first one is being able to justify my choices and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So there's a main question in the application that asks you to talk about the overview and importance, the significance to the wider community, the impact on my practice and the practice of others, and the benefits and justifications of any risks within your design. What this did for me was something I really needed. It pulled me back in. So as I was reading in my first year, my net got wider and wider and wider because I was getting so interested in what I was reading. And I'm like, just, increase the net over here and make it bigger and bigger. What the ethics application made me do is pull it back down, set parameters onto my lit review. What are my reasons? How am I defining my boundaries? What is my main focus? For me, that really zeroed in. It's the mental health crisis that doctoral researchers are experiencing and identifying support. It also changed my research questions in. I knew I was doing mixed methods, but the importance of the mixed methods became really embedded within my overall research design and questions. And it also highlighted the risks in my methodology, which again, I knew were there, but I needed to put some support in. So it changed my research design alongside my justifications. My original research design was I knew I was going to use online surveys with semi-structured interviews. What I came out with is an online survey with open-ended questions at the end, followed by a visual research method, photo elicitation, with semi-structured interviews. And I'm targeting my recruitment from my second study from my first. So at the end of my first study, I'm going to ask participants if they're happy to be contacted to come back for a second. So again, it's bringing things down and making it much more specific. Why did this change? I had to go back through the process and really think about what is my main focus, what do I want to know, and how can I find this out in a way that benefits my participants the most, because that's the key point. That took me back to looking at the theoretical underpinnings of my research, and what I had to do pretty much was drop the application and go back to my reading. I did a lot of reading in and outside my topic area to make sure that what I was picking was the best choice. In a lot of discussions with my supervisors as well, this led me to implement visual research methods, partially as a support for my participants because it helps mitigate some of the risks around discussing mental health. And there's a lot of benefits for visual research methods sort of within my subject area. So going through the ethics application completely changed my research design, but definitely for the better, and it made it much stronger. It changed my pool of participants. I knew I was recruiting from the student population. It narrowed it down further. So I'm going to be recruiting from a cohort of doctoral researchers, both domestic and international. This fits with my main focus. It fits with my justifications. It's more accurate and it's more specific because I'm looking at stress. Also, doctoral researchers are the most stressed in the research. So this makes the most sense for me and my research, and it altered my research questions. Going through the ethics application also changed my mode of data analysis. Originally, I was going to use IPA, interpretive phenomenological analysis. This changed to thematic analysis. The reason for this is because, again, going back to the justification, why am I using IPA? To say why I'm doing that, I need to read about all of the other methods of data analysis to know why I'm not using that. And in the process of doing that, I happen to change my mode of analysis. This also changed the number of participants that I'd need for my recruitment and changed my design. It gave me clarity in my research questions, and TA is a much better fit for looking at themes across data, which is what I'm doing. So finally, the ethics application process, it helped me identify risks. I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about personal experiences, and that there's risk associated with talking about that with someone and bringing that up and making it present. So I was able to embed support within my research design using visual research methods, using check-ins. I created a mental health resources document, signposting, identified resource available, and all throughout both my quants and my qual projects, I've sort of got a lot of stop gaps where people can stop, take a break, check in, make sure everything's okay, and then resume. And being able to really identify these risks was very helpful for me. So what are the benefits of going through the ethics application process that took me 10 months and 2 applications? Research integrity, overall transparency. It gives me that blueprint that I can return to bullet point by bullet point every time, which I'm doing already. I'm going back to my ethics document. It means that I can justify all of my choices. I know exactly why I'm using the methods I'm using, and I feel confident in arguing for them, which is sort of what you're going to have to do as you go along. The writing still counts. All of the writing I've done for my ethics, it feels like it doesn't, but it does. You can use it in your APR. So as part of your writing submission, you can use what you've put in your ethics. Completing forms like this is important if you're hoping to go into academia in future, and it gives you clearer research questions to use throughout all of your work. There are drawbacks, of course. It took me an enormous amount of time to do 2 ethics applications. I think mentally that was really tricky. It felt like I was away from doing what I should be doing. This is time away from my writing, it's time away from my research, whereas in reality, it's given me that basis to work up from. But it is tricky. Factoring in additional amendments and changes, altered timelines, these are all things that you'll need to consider. And it's a lot of reading, both with what you've picked and outside, to make sure that you're doing the right thing for your design and the right thing for your participants. So just in conclusion, going through the ethics application for me was a serious investment into my blueprint. It's one I'm really glad that I've done, as it's given me a good foundation. And although it feels like time away, it will support everything that you do. And the writing still counts towards your APR, so it's helpful to keep that in mind. And ultimately, it makes it a much better study for your participants, which is the main thing. Thanks for listening, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks.